The first sensation was not pain, but sound. A rhythmic, insistent beeping, a metronome counting out the seconds of a life she had momentarily misplaced. It was a sound as familiar to Alara Vance as her own name, the soundtrack to her professional life. But this time, it was not coming from a monitor beside a child's crib at St. Jude's Pediatric. It was coming from a machine tethered to her own body, its digital pulse a stark announcement of her own vulnerability. Consciousness returned not as a gentle sunrise, but as a series of fragmented, disjointed images. The blinding glare of surgical lights. A voice, sharp and urgent, calling for a clamp. The ghost of her younger brother, Leo's laughter, echoing from a sun-drenched park a decade away. Then, the pain arrived. It started as a low, dull throb deep within her abdomen, a sleeping giant stirring. With every beat of her heart, it grew, radiating outwards, a molten core of fire that seemed to consume her from the inside. Her eyelids fluttered open, heavy as lead shutters. The world swam into a blurry, bleached-out focus. The acoustic tile ceiling, the four-pole standing like a silent sentinel by her bed, the scratchy, impersonal fabric of the hospital gown against her skin. A groan escaped her lips, a raw, involuntary sound. "Hey, hey! Easy does it, superstar." Maya's voice cut through the fog. Ellie turned her head, the simple movement sending a fresh, searing wave of agony through her midsection. Her best friend was a welcome, solid presence in the sterile chaos. Her dark hair a mess, her scrubs rumpled from a night spent slumped in the unforgiving visitor's chair. Worry was etched into the lines around her usually smiling eyes. "Maya?" Ellie's voice was a dry, rasping whisper, her throat feeling like sandpaper. "The one and only," Maya said, her hand instantly finding Ellie's, her touch warm and reassuring. "Welcome back to the land of the living. How are you feeling? And if you say fine, I will personally smother you with this very flat pillow." Ellie attempted a smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "On a scale of 1 to hit by a freight train, I think the train backed up and had another go." "Sounds about right," Maya chuckled, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "You scared the hell out of me for a minute there. Your pressure dropped a little post-op, but you're stable now." "You did it, Elle. The transplant was a success. For both of you, the segment was a perfect match, and the recipient is stable in the ICU." A profound, quiet satisfaction pierced through the haze of pain and medication. Stable. A simple word, yet it held the weight of a life. She had done it. She had stepped into the void of a stranger's despair and offered a piece of herself, a tangible offering of hope. For a fleeting moment, the image of Leo, pale and jaundiced in his own hospital bed, flickered in her mind. The gnawing helplessness of that time, the rage at the universe for its cruel lottery, had been a poison in her soul for 10 years. Now, for the first time, she felt a tiny drop of antidote. She had honored him. She drifted in and out of a morphine-laced sleep for the rest of the day, the hours punctuated by the gentle rustle of nurses checking her vitals and Maya's quiet presence. The following morning, the fog began to lift, replaced by a clearer, sharper awareness of her body. The pain was still there, a constant companion, but it was more manageable, a dull burn instead of a raging fire. "You know," Maya said, handing her a plastic cup of water with a straw, "for someone who just had a major organ partially removed, you look surprisingly not dead." "High praise," Ellie croaked, taking a small sip. "How's the ward? Are you covering my shifts?" "Of course I am. And don't you worry about the little terrors on the PEDS floor. I've got it under control. Little Timmy sends his love, by the way. He drew you a picture. It's either a unicorn or a potato with legs. The jury's still out." Ellie smiled, a genuine one this time. She thought of her patients, of the small, fierce battles they fought every day. She thought of the mountain of student loan debt waiting for her, the rent on her tiny apartment that was due next week. Taking a month off work for recovery was a financial hit she couldn't really afford, but she had saved aggressively for months to make it possible. It was a sacrifice she had been willing to make. "It was worth it," she murmured, more to herself than to Maya. "I know," Maya said softly. "I never doubted that. I just worry about you, Elle. You give away pieces of yourself all the time. Your energy, your heart. I just didn't expect you to start giving away literal organs." "It felt right," Ellie said, looking out the window at the sliver of smoggy sky visible between two hospital wings. "It felt like balancing a scale." It was then that the rhythm of her recovery was unexpectedly disrupted. A nurse, one Ellie didn't recognize, entered the room, her expression a mixture of professional deference and unconcealed curiosity. "Miss Vance, you have a visitor?" Ellie frowned, her mind still fuzzy. "My parents aren't due until 6. "It's not your parents," the nurse said, her voice dropping slightly. "It's a Mr. Samuel Chen. He says he's an attorney." "An attorney?" Maya sat up straighter, her protective instincts immediately on high alert. "What would an attorney want with her?" The nurse just shrugged, her eyes wide. "He says it's regarding the, donation?" Ellie's heart gave a nervous flutter. The entire process was meant to be sealed, a double-blind exchange of medical information and organic tissue, nothing more, no names, no contact. It was the core principle of altruistic donation. The arrival of a lawyer felt like a violation, a crack in the carefully constructed wall of anonymity she had insisted upon. Mr. Samuel Chen was a man who seemed to command silence simply by entering a room. He was in his late 60s, with a mane of distinguished silver hair and a face that held both the sharp intelligence of his profession and a deep, weary kindness. His suit was impeccably tailored, a dark charcoal gray that seemed to absorb the harsh hospital lighting. He carried an old, scuffed leather briefcase that looked like it had borne witness to 1,000 secrets. "Miss Vance," he began, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that was a stark contrast to the clinical sounds of the room. "Forgive this intrusion, I know you are recovering. My name is Samuel Chen. I was the attorney and, I'm honored to say, the friend of Mr. Arthur Pendleton." The name hung in the air for a moment before it registered. Pendleton. The recipient. Is he okay?" Ellie asked, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Mr. Chen's kind eyes filled with a profound sadness. He took a moment before speaking, as if weighing the impact of his next words. "I'm afraid Mr. Blank Pendleton passed away peacefully last night, Ms. Vance. There were post-operative complications unrelated to your donation, which was a perfect success. His body, I'm sorry to say, was simply too weakened by his long illness to withstand the strain of the recovery." The news hit Ellie with the force of a physical blow. A wave of nausea, entirely separate from the post-surgical discomfort, roiled in her stomach. It was an absurd, irrational reaction. She hadn't known this man. She had never seen his face or heard his voice. Yet, for a few intense hours, their lives had been physically intertwined. She had given a part of her body in the fervent hope that it would grant him more years, more sunrises, more time, and it hadn't worked. A bitter sense of failure, sharp and familiar, rose in her throat. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "I feel like I failed him." "No," Mr. Chen said, his voice firm, cutting through her self-recrimination. "Absolutely not. Ms. Vance, you must not think that for a second. You gave Arthur a gift more profound than time. You gave him proof. Proof that genuine goodness still exists in a world that had shown him very little of it." He moved closer to the bed and placed his briefcase on the visitor's chair. Arthur was a man of decisive action and deep feeling. He knew his chances were slim. But in the 48 hours your gift granted him, his mind was clear and he was adamant about what he wanted to do. "He had me come to his room yesterday afternoon." He amended his final will and testament. Ellie and Maya exchanged a look of utter confusion. "His will? I don't understand what that has to do with me," Ellie said, her voice hoarse. Mr. Chen opened his briefcase and retrieved a large, thick manila envelope. The paper was heavy, expensive. He held it out to her. "Arthur was surrounded by wealth his entire life, Miss Vance. He came to see it as a corrupting force, a wall that separated people. Your act, a pure act of giving with no expectation of reward, broke through that wall. He felt it was the single most significant event of his later years, and he insisted on acknowledging it." With Maya's help, Ellie sat up a little straighter, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. Her trembling fingers fumbled with the clasp of the envelope. Inside, nestled in a sheaf of legal documents, was a single, heavy piece of cardstock. It was a deed. Her eyes scanned the elegant, printed script, her brain struggling to process the words. Property deed. Address. 1 Ocean View Drive, Seacrest Bluffs. Beneath the formal text, a short, handwritten note was scrawled in an elegant but noticeably frail hand. "Thank you for the gift of life, however brief. Please accept a gift of a life in return. A.P." What is this?" Ellie breathed, the words barely audible. "It is the deed to Arthur Pendleton's primary residence," Mr. Chen explained, his voice steady and clear, a lighthouse in her sea of confusion. It is a beachside mansion in Seacrest Bluffs. It is fully paid for. There are no liens, no mortgages. He also had me establish a substantial blind trust, managed by my firm, to cover all property taxes, insurance, and general upkeep for the next 20 years. He wanted it to be a true gift, not a burden. He paused, letting the impossible weight of his words settle. It is yours, Miss Vance. Unconditionally. The room fell silent. The only sound, the frantic, accelerating beep of Ellie's heart monitor. Maya's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. A mansion. A $40 million mansion, as they would later learn. It was a sum so vast, a reality so alien, it was utterly incomprehensible. Ellie's world, a world defined by the struggle to pay off student loan debt, by 12-hour shifts and instant noodle dinners in her cramped second-floor apartment, tilted violently on its axis. She stared at the deed in her hand, the name, Ilara Vance, typed neatly alongside the impossibly glamorous address. The letters began to blur. The sterile smell of the hospital, the dull throb in her abdomen, Maya's stunned face, it all seemed to recede, fading into a dull roar in her ears. A gift of a life. The words echoed in her head, a strange and terrifying prophecy from a man she had never met, a ghost who had just upended her entire existence with a single, stunning act of gratitude. The heart monitor continued its frantic, shrieking rhythm, a wild alarm announcing the arrival of a fate she could never have imagined. The drive to Seacrest Bluffs 2 days later felt like a journey to another planet. Mr. Chen navigated his silent, luxurious sedan through the sun-drenched coastal roads of Southern California, while Ellie sat in the passenger seat, a pillow clutched to her abdomen, her gaze lost in the shimmering heat rising from the asphalt. Every bump and turn was a sharp reminder of the fresh, angry incision hidden beneath her loose-fitting clothes. Maya was in the back, uncharacteristically quiet, her face pressed against the window as they passed through neighborhoods where the houses were less like homes and more like corporate headquarters, all sharp angles, gleaming glass, and gates that promised absolute privacy. "Are you okay?" Maya finally asked, her voice soft. "I don't know what I am," Ellie confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I feel like I'm in a movie, and I haven't read the script. This doesn't feel real." "A man died, Maya, and I'm driving to his house to—" "What? Move in?" "It feels ghoulish. It feels wrong." "It's what he wanted," Mr. Chen interjected gently from the driver's seat, his eyes on the road. Arthur was not a man given to whims. Every line he designed in a building, every decision he made in his life, was deliberate. He saw this not as a reward for his death, but as an acknowledgement of your life, of the choice you made. They turned onto a narrow lane marked Ocean View Drive, a private road that wound its way up a rugged cliff face. At the end of it stood a formidable gate of black steel and dark wood. It swung open silently, beckoned by a remote in Mr. Chen's hand, revealing a long driveway paved with pale gray stone that curved towards the cliff's edge. And then she saw it. It wasn't a mansion in the classical Cencino marble columns or Baroque flourishes. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, a breathtaking structure of steel, glass, and redwood that seemed to grow organically from the rock itself. It was all clean lines and dramatic cantilevers, with vast walls of windows that drank in the brilliant afternoon light and the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean. An infinity pool on the main terrace created the illusion of a seamless sheet of water stretching from the house to the horizon. It was powerful, elegant, and utterly intimidating. "Mr. Pendleton designed it himself. Mr. Pendleton designed it himself," Chen said softly, pulling the car to a stop before the main entrance. He called it the Ledge. He said it was the only place he felt he could truly see the world. They stepped out of the car into the warm, salt-tinged air. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below was a low, rhythmic roar. Ellie felt small, an imposter in this world of impossible wealth and beauty. Maya let out a low whistle. "Holy, Ellie, this is insane. This is movie star insane." The inside was even more breathtaking. The main living space was a cavernous, open-plan area with 20-foot ceilings and a west-facing wall made entirely of glass. The furniture was minimalist and exquisite, chosen with an architect's eye for form and function. A grand piano, black and gleaming, sat in one corner. Polished marble floors felt cool underfoot. It was less a home and more a private art gallery, beautiful but sterile, curated but not lived in. Ellie could feel the ghost of Arthur Pendleton here, a man of immense taste and, she suspected, profound loneliness. "Please, make yourselves comfortable," Mr. Chen said. "I have some papers to file downtown. I will leave you the keys. Take your time. Absorb it. I'll return in a few hours." He placed a single, heavy key fob on a glass table and departed, leaving Ellie and Maya alone in the silent, cavernous space. For a long time they just stood there, dwarfed by the scale of it all. Then, slowly, Ellie began to explore. She walked through the state-of-the-art kitchen, her fingers tracing the edge of a cold, stainless steel island. She wandered into a library where the shelves were filled not just with books on architecture, but with volumes of poetry, Keats, Dickinson, Rilke. On a worn leather armchair sat a single book, left open as if its reader had just stepped away. It was Walt Whitman. A passage was underlined. "I am large. I contain multitudes." She found the master suite. It was a vast room with another wall of glass overlooking the ocean. The bed was neatly made, the linens crisp and white. It felt untouched, unlived in. It was here, on the nightstand, that she found the first true piece of the man. It was a framed photograph, not of family, but of a scruffy, one-eyed dog, a mutt of indeterminate breed, sitting proudly on a beach. It was an odd, personal touch in a house that felt so impersonal. It made her smile. "Ellie, you have to see this," Maya called from the other end of the house. Ellie followed her voice to a hallway lined with framed architectural drawings, the original blueprints for the house. At the end of the hall was a smaller room, a study. A large oak desk faced the window. On it sat a blotter, a heavy brass lamp, and an old-fashioned fountain pen. It was a room of quiet work and contemplation. And on the wall, there was a series of framed photographs, but not of smiling children or family gatherings. They were candid, black-and-white photos of construction workers, craftsmen, masons, their faces etched with effort and pride. Arthur Pendleton had chosen to honor the people who had built his masterpiece. It was in this room that the sheer weight of his gift, and the character of the man who gave it, truly began to settle on her. He wasn't just a rich eccentric. He was a man who valued creation, effort, and authenticity. A man who saw the beauty in a scruffy dog and the dignity in a worker's hands. And somehow, he had seen something in her, a nurse from a working-class family, that he deemed worthy of all this. A tear slid down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or confusion, but of a strange, overwhelming gratitude. For the first time, she felt a flicker of belonging, a whisper of understanding. It was this fragile, nascent peace that was shattered by the furious growl of a high-performance engine. A sleek black Mercedes tore up the driveway and screeched to a halt just behind Mr. Chen's sedan. Two figures emerged, moving with the entitled urgency of people who have never been told to wait. Julian Pendleton was tall and lean, with the predatory stillness of a shark in a tailored suit. His face was a mask of cold fury. Beside him, his sister, Beatrice Trixie Pendleton Covington, was a vision of performative grief. Dressed in a chic black dress, her face a carefully composed portrait of sorrow that didn't quite reach her hard, calculating eyes. They stormed into the house, their expensive shoes clicking aggressively on the marble floor. They completely ignored Maya, their attention fixed on Ellie like a pair of circling hawks. Julian stopped inches from her, his sheer proximity an act of aggression. His voice was low and venomous. "So you're the one, the little organ harvester." Trixie glided around Ellie, her gaze a clinical assessment of Ellie's simple clothes, her pale face, her obvious discomfort. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescending pity. "You must be so terribly confused. My father was a very, very sick man. Not in his right mind. He was highly susceptible to suggestion, especially from those in the service industries." The insult was clear, wrapped in a thin veneer of concern. Julian's hand shot out, not to touch her, but as an imperious gesture. "The deed. Give it to us now. This is a family home, a legacy. It is not some lottery prize for a grasping little nurse. We are prepared to be reasonable." He named a figure $50,000 if he were offering to buy a used car, the number a calculated insult. "It's a life-changing sum for someone like you, I'm sure. Take it and disappear." The sheer arrogance of it, The raw, undisguised contempt ignited a small, hot spark of defiance in Ellie's chest. The pain in her abdomen flared, but it was her spirit that truly ached with indignation. "He gave it to me," she said, her voice shaking but firm. She met Julian's cold gaze. "Your father wanted me to have this house." Trixie let out a brittle, humorless laugh. "What my father wanted," she snapped, her mask of pity falling away to reveal a face of pure venom, "was the love and support of his family? Something you clearly took advantage of while we were kept in the dark. About his rash decisions. This will not stand." She turned to Mr. Spatian. Chen, who had just returned and was standing quietly in the doorway, his face a mask of weary resignation. "And you! How could you let this happen? You were his lawyer, for God's sake!" Julian followed her lead, his fury now directed at the calm, immovable figure of the attorney. "You're fired, Chen. You facilitated this farce. You preyed on a dying man right along with her." Mr. Chen did not flinch. He adjusted his tie, a small, deliberate movement that spoke of immense control. "I am the executor of your father's legally ratified final will and testament, Julian," he said, his voice level. "A will he had me validate with a full psychiatric evaluation and notarize with 2 independent witnesses less than 12 hours before he passed. He was of perfectly sound mind. He was also, I might add, acutely aware of how you would both react." The statement hit them like a splash of cold water, but it only fueled their rage. Julian turned his glare back to Ellie, his face a contorted mask of hate. He jabbed a finger in her direction, the gesture sharp and violent. "Enjoy the view while you can. We will fight this. We will drag your name through the mud until you are a pariah. You'll be back in your slum by the end of the month, and we will be suing you, the hospital, and anyone else who helped you perpetrate this fraud." They spun on their heels and stormed out, the slam of the Mercedes doors echoing like gunshots in the sudden silence. Maya, who had been standing by the window, her knuckles white, finally exploded. The nerve! The absolute unmitigated gall of those vultures? Organ harvester? Who says that? But Ellie barely heard her. She stumbled back against the cold glass wall of the living room, her hand pressed against her abdomen. The beautiful, sunlit mansion suddenly felt like a cage, a gilded battleground she was completely unequipped to defend. The physical pain was a dull, manageable ache compared to the sickening dread that was now flooding her veins. Arthur Pendleton had given her the gift of a new life, but his children had just declared war on it.